Fruity Waveshaper in FL Studio. This is another one of those things that seems really confusing at first, but once you understand it, is actually pretty simple. So right now on the default setting, we have a diagonal line. This x-axis horizontally is the input volume, and the vertical y-axis is the output volume, or the signal after it's been distorted. So with the diagonal line, it's doing nothing at all to the sound. An easy way to understand this is picture this slope right here as a road. So if the road is smooth, you're not going to have a very bumpy ride. You're going to have a smooth ride. Even if we take it up a lot, it's going to get more distorted, but everything will be around the same volume. It's a nice ride. You're still cruising. You're going up, but you're still cruising because it's nice and smooth. But if you make the road jagged like this and all messed up, there's rocks in the road, there's tires all over the place, you get a very bumpy ride. If you don't take anything from this video besides this, just remember that jagged, sharp lines make more intense and chaotic distortion, and gentle curves make softer and more even distortion. So why does the distortion work this way? It works this way because whenever we bend the curve, we're changing how quickly the signal goes from loud to quiet. And the faster the waveform goes from loud to quiet, the more distorted it's going to sound. For instance, like a sine wave is very smooth. It just goes up and down nice and smooth like. What you could say is the opposite of a sine wave, or a distorted sine wave, would be a square wave. And the reason a square wave sounds so distorted and loud is because the trough and the peak are changing super fast. With a sine wave, it goes up and down smoothly, but with a square wave, it's just straight like trough to peak like that. And the faster you move between the different parts of the waveform, the more distorted and crunchy it's going to sound. If we right-click anywhere on the grid to add a point, and we bring this all the way to the top left corner, what we're essentially doing is doing square distortion. We are pretty much turning whatever we put into the Waveshaper into a square wave. And you can look at the top here to see what I'm talking about. Maybe turn your volume down just a little bit just in case, but look at the top here. It basically turned every single part of the sound into a square wave, which means that it's just more heavily distorted. Now, the reason it sounds like this when we have this at the top left is because this is telling FL Studio that everything, no matter what the volume of the input signal, it's going to get distorted as much as possible. But if we do something more jagged like this, there are different points in the waveform that are going to get distorted, and the parts where it's lower down is not going to get distorted as much, which is going to give you like weird, stuttery, glitchy type of distortion. Because you can hear how drastically the kick is distorted compared to the snare that doesn't sound like it has that much distortion on it. So the cool thing about Fruity Waveshaper is it looks very confusing and difficult to use, but once you start playing around with it, and I would suggest just going crazy and just moving these dots all around, because for me it's more something I couldn't understand just with logic. It's more something I have to play with to understand. So the cool thing about it, and what makes it different than most distortions, is it's like a visual representation of distortion, and you can shape it from the ground up to be however you want. So just remember that gentle curves equals softer distortion, jagged curves equals more abrupt, rough distortion. And at the bottom they have a snap to grid feature, so whenever you place a point, it will stay inside the grid perfectly. And at the bottom right we have preamp, which determines the level of the input signal. Then we have mix, which determines how much is going to be distorted, how much information is going to be taken from this waveform that you create to make the distortion. and post is going to be the post gain or the output volume. And I would highly recommend checking out the different presets on here to get a better understanding of it. For instance, the soft clipper. So the way the soft clipper is working is at the quieter volumes, nothing is changing because the line is diagonal. Everything is staying the same. But once it reaches a certain volume, it will distort a bit and completely cut off. So it will essentially turn the loudest peaks into a square wave, but without causing distortion. So it's basically like a brick wall limiter. But yeah, this is definitely one of those ones you should experiment with, draw all types of shapes and see what happens. And this video is a clip from a longer video called the ABCs of FL Studio, which you can find in the description of this video. If you would like to see more FL Studio plugins broken down simply, check that out and have a wondrous